Summary of Housekeeping by Marilynne Robinson. Ruth Stone recalls her upbringing without a firm foundation. After Ruth and Lucille's mother, Helen, kills herself, the two girls move in with their grandma, Sylvia Foster, in Fingerbone, Idaho. After their grandma died, the girls were taken care of by their worried single great-aunts, Lily and Nona. Finally, their mother's sister, Sylvie, moved to Fingerbone to take care of them. Sylvie is strange and different, and she has been a drifter for years. Even though she has been married before, she doesn't want to talk about it or answer questions about where her husband is. Sylvie reminds Lucille and Ruth a lot of their mother, but she may be even stranger and harder to figure out. They worry that Sylvie will soon leave them, too, but in the weeks after she arrives, the three of them grow closer as they all have to deal with a terrible flood together. Ruth and Lucille start skipping school almost every day to spend their days at the big lake in the middle of Fingerbone. This is the same lake that killed their grandfather Edmund in a terrible train accident years before they were born, and it is also the same lake that their mother drove into when she killed herself. Sylvie helps the girls skip school instead of scolding them. She writes notes to their teachers saying they are sick with the discomforts of female adolescence. Even though Sylvie is friends with Lucille, her strange ways of keeping the house and her love of useless, temporary clothes and items soon push Lucille away, and Ruth starts to get the sense that her sister wants to live like normal people. During the summer, Lucille starts to ask Sylvie more and more personal questions about her life and past. Sylvie refuses to answer these questions. Lucille gets annoyed by Sylvie's embarrassing habits, which show that she is a homeless person through and through. For example, Sylvie sleeps with her shoes under her pillows and often takes naps on park benches. As Lucille refuses to join Sylvie's dream world, she starts to make up fake memories about their mother. She thinks of her as a happy, caring widow who died in an accident. Ruth and Lucille both get the same amount of company, kindness, and love from Sylvie, but Lucille wants more and more to hang out with her girls from school and learn with them about makeup, sewing, cooking, and entertaining. After Lucille and Ruth have a big fight, Lucille starts ignoring Ruth for real. When they go back to school in the fall, they have to explain their absences to the director, and Lucille says something about Ruth not having any security or direction. She stops eating lunch with Ruth, won't eat the dinners Sylvie makes, and eventually moves out of the house to live with her home economics teacher, Miss Royce, when she comes home from a school dance one night to find Sylvie sleeping in the bed that she and Ruth usually share. The morning after Lucille leaves, Sylvie wakes Ruth up early so they can go out on the lake for an adventure. Sylvie wants to show Ruth a special place. Sylvie rushes Ruth out the door, and the two of them steal a neighbor's boat. When he finds them, they row to the middle of the lake to avoid his yells and screams. When they get to a small island in the middle of the lake, Sylvie takes Ruth to a secret, frost-covered valley with a broken-down house in the middle. Sylvie tells Ruth that when she comes here, she sometimes thinks she can hear the sounds of wild children, and she wishes she could meet them and look at them. Ruth and her Aunt Sylvie spend the day on the island. They eat lunch on the beach and then head back to the valley when the sun warms it up. But Ruth gets lost in her thoughts and loses her aunt. Ruth is sad and scared because she thinks Sylvie has finally left her, just like Ruth has always thought she would. Ruth is lost and crying when Sylvie comes back. She rushes Ruth off the rock and back into the boat. They float on the lake until sunrise, then climb up the bridge in the middle of the lake and take a freight train back to town. As word gets around town about Sylvie and Ruth's boxcar ride, the sheriff and several neighbors worry about Ruth's safety and go to her house to check on her. The house is falling apart because Sylvie has been saving old magazines and newspapers, and mice and cats have taken over. Sylvie cleans up the house and starts acting like a normal neighbor when she finds out that a meeting has been set up to decide if she is a good babysitter or not. Even though these things are changing, Ruth knows that the people of Fingerbone are afraid of change and that she and Sylvie are doomed. Ruth and Sylvie make a fire in the garden one night and start burning old newspapers and magazines. After the fire goes out, Ruth hides from Sylvie in the field as a cruel game, knowing that Sylvie can't run around calling for her while everyone is watching. When the sheriff comes to check on things, Sylvie has to say that Ruth is hiding in the orchard. Ruth comes out feeling embarrassed and sheepish, and when the sheriff invites her to stay the night at his house, she screams no in a very loud voice. Ruth and Sylvie work together to set fire to the house and burn it down after the sheriff leaves. It's hard to start the fire, so they have to leave without knowing for sure that the house will catch on fire. Ruth can't bring herself to look back at the house they left behind as Sylvie and she run across the bridge over the lake and out of Fingerbone for good. After the fire, people hear that Sylvie and Ruth died in a terrible accident in which the lake claimed them. They travel by train around the country for more than 7 years, living with Sylvie's friends and seeing the world together. Ruth never looks for Lucille or goes back to Fingerbone, but she thinks about her sister every day. She wonders if Lucille is living in the old house or in a big city, and if she, too, thinks about Ruth and Sylvie all the time.
About the author. Marilynne Summers, who later became Marilynne Robinson, was born in Sandpoint, Idaho, in 1943. She was close to her brother, who also became a writer and art historian when he grew up. She got her doctorate in English from the University of Washington, where she did her paper on Shakespeare's Henry VI, Part 2. She wrote Housekeeping in the late 1970s. She didn't think it would get much attention, but it was praised all over the country and won the prestigious PN/Hemingway Award for Best First Book. After Housekeeping came out, Robinson turned to journalism and wrote a few books of criticism. Her next novel, Gilead, didn't come out for over 20 years. Gilead won the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction in 2005, and Robinson went on to write 2 more books about the same people over the next 10 years. President Barack Obama gave her the National Humanities Medal in 2012. She lives in Iowa City, where she is professor emeritus and was a teacher at the famous Iowa Writers' Workshop.
Hope we summarized it fully and you liked it. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so that we are motivated to create more videos.